What if I told you that there are ancient secrets so powerful that they have been deliberately hidden from the masses, not by conspiracy, but by our own weakness and addiction to mediocrity? Most people today are living as mental slaves, controlled by their emotions, their circumstances, and their fears. They wonder why they feel powerless, why they can't break free from destructive patterns, why they remain stuck while others seem to possess an almost supernatural level of mental strength. The truth is brutal and beautiful. Over 2,000 years ago, a select group of philosophers discovered laws of mental mastery so transformative that they could turn ordinary people into psychological warriors. These weren't theoretical concepts debated in comfortable classrooms. These were survival principles forged in the crucible of war, betrayal, slavery, and death. Marcus Aurelius, the most powerful man in the ancient world, used these laws to lead an empire while facing plagues, rebellions, and personal tragedies. Epictetus, born into slavery, used them to achieve a freedom so complete that no chains could contain his spirit. Today, I'm going to reveal 8 forbidden Stoic laws that will permanently rewire your mind and make you mentally unbreakable. These aren't motivational concepts you'll forget tomorrow. These are psychological weapons that, once understood and applied, will change how you think, feel, and respond to everything life throws at you. But I must warn you, once you see the truth behind these laws, you cannot unsee it. You cannot go back to living as a victim of your circumstances. You will be forever changed. Before we begin this journey into mental invincibility, I need you to make a commitment. This isn't entertainment. This isn't background noise while you scroll through your phone. This is your awakening. If you're serious about transformation, like this video right now, drop a comment as we go through each law, especially when something hits your soul. Share this with someone who desperately needs to break free from mental weakness. And most importantly, don't skip any part, because even one missed law could cost you the breakthrough that changes everything. The first forbidden law will destroy everything you think you know about strength. Most people believe strength means never feeling pain, never showing vulnerability, never admitting weakness. But the Stoics discovered the opposite truth. Real strength comes from deliberately choosing suffering before life forces it upon you. This is the law of voluntary hardship, and it's forbidden because it goes against every instinct we have for comfort and ease. Think about this for a moment. Every person you admire, every success story you've heard, every breakthrough that inspired you, they all have one thing in common. They didn't achieve greatness by avoiding difficulty. They achieved it by walking through fire when others walked around it. The ancient Stoics understood that comfort is the enemy of growth, that ease is the killer of potential, that our addiction to pleasure is actually a prison we build for ourselves. Seneca, one of the wealthiest and most powerful men in Rome, would deliberately sleep on the floor, eat simple food, and wear plain clothes, not out of poverty, but out of wisdom. He knew that by choosing controlled discomfort, he was building psychological armor that would protect him when life inevitably became uncomfortable. He was training his mind to remain calm when others would panic, to stay focused when others would crumble. This law is forbidden because it reveals an uncomfortable truth. Most of our suffering comes not from external events, but from our inability to handle discomfort. We avoid the gym because it's uncomfortable. We avoid difficult conversations because they're uncomfortable. We avoid taking risks because failure is uncomfortable. But what happens when we train ourselves to be comfortable with discomfort? We become dangerous, not to others, but to the limitations that once controlled us. The second forbidden law will shatter your relationship with your emotions forever. We've been taught that emotions are sacred, that we should trust our feelings, that emotional expression is always healthy. But the Stoics discovered a terrifying truth. Your emotions are not your master unless you allow them to be. This is the law of emotional sovereignty, and it's forbidden because it gives you power that most people will never possess. Epictetus, who knew real slavery and real freedom, said something that should be carved into every person's soul. Any person capable of angering you becomes your master. He can anger you only when you permit yourself to be disturbed by him. Let that reality sink into your consciousness. Every time you react emotionally to someone else's words or actions, you've just handed them control over your inner state. You've made them your master and yourself their slave. But here's where this law becomes revolutionary. The Stoics weren't teaching emotional suppression or robotic behavior. They were teaching emotional mastery, the ability to feel deeply while choosing consciously. You can feel anger without being controlled by anger. You can experience fear without being paralyzed by fear. You can feel sadness without drowning in despair. This is true freedom, not the absence of emotion, but the conscious direction of emotional energy. Marcus Aurelius, who had every reason to be consumed by the burdens of leadership, wrote in his private journal, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength." This isn't philosophical theory. This is practical psychology. When you stop being a slave to your emotional reactions, you become the author of your life story instead of a character reacting to others' scripts. The third forbidden law will destroy your need for external validation forever. We live in a world obsessed with approval, likes, praise, and recognition. But the ancient Stoics discovered that seeking approval from others is actually a form of psychological suicide. This is the law of internal validation, and it's forbidden because it threatens the entire structure of how modern society controls people through their desperate need to be liked. Think about how much energy you waste trying to impress people who don't matter, seeking approval from people who don't even know who you really are, or modifying your behavior to fit in with groups that add no value to your life. The Stoics understood that when you live for other people's opinions, you die a little every day. You become a performer instead of an authentic human being. Seneca wrote something that should terrify and liberate you simultaneously. Every new beginning comes from some other beginning's end. When you stop seeking approval from others, your old identity dies. The people pleaser dies. The validation seeker dies. The approval addict dies. And from that death, something magnificent is born. A person who acts from their own values, who speaks their own truth, who walks their own path regardless of whether anyone else understands or approves. This law is forbidden because it creates individuals who cannot be controlled through social pressure, who cannot be manipulated through the fear of rejection, who cannot be bought with praise or broken with criticism. These people become dangerous to systems that depend on conformity and compliance. They become leaders by default because they're the only ones willing to stand alone when necessary. The fourth forbidden law will revolutionize your relationship with failure and defeat. Society teaches us that failure is something to be avoided at all costs, that defeat is shameful, that losing means you're weak. But the Stoics discovered the opposite truth. Failure is not your enemy, it's your teacher. This is the law of anti-fragile thinking, and it's forbidden because it transforms victims into victors. Most people are fragile. They break under pressure, crumble when things don't go as planned, and collapse when faced with unexpected challenges. Some people are resilient. They can withstand difficulties and bounce back to their original state. But the Stoics aimed for something far more powerful. They wanted to become anti-fragile, meaning they actually became stronger from stress, better from setbacks, and more powerful from defeats. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." This isn't motivational speak. This is a fundamental rewiring of how you perceive obstacles. Every rejection teaches you resilience. Every failure teaches you what doesn't work. Every setback forces you to develop new strategies. Every defeat reveals weaknesses that you can now strengthen. This law is forbidden because it removes the power that failure has over you. When you stop fearing failure, you start taking the risks that lead to extraordinary success. When you stop avoiding difficulties, you start developing the skills that make you irreplaceable. When you stop running from challenges, you start building the character that makes you unbreakable. The fifth forbidden law will destroy your addiction to comfort and certainty forever. We've been programmed to seek security, predictability, and guaranteed outcomes. But the Stoics discovered that this addiction to certainty is actually what makes us weak and unprepared for reality. This is the law of uncertainty mastery, and it's forbidden because it requires you to embrace the very thing most people spend their entire lives trying to avoid. Life is fundamentally uncertain. You don't know what tomorrow will bring. You don't know if your plans will work out. You don't know if the people you love will always be there. You don't know if your health, your wealth, or your circumstances will remain stable. Most people find this reality terrifying, so they create elaborate illusions of control and security. But the Stoics found liberation in accepting uncertainty as the only certainty. When you stop demanding guarantees from life, you stop being paralyzed by the lack of them. When you accept that change is the only constant, you become adaptable instead of rigid. When you embrace uncertainty as an adventure rather than a threat, you become capable of thriving in any situation. This is true power. Not the ability to control outcomes, but the ability to respond magnificently to whatever outcomes arise. Seneca practiced something he called premeditatio malorum, imagining loss before it happens. Not to become pessimistic, but to become prepared. By mentally rehearsing difficulties, setbacks, and losses, he built psychological immunity to shock and despair. When bad things happened, he wasn't devastated because he had already processed the possibility and prepared his response. The sixth forbidden law will transform your relationship with time and mortality forever. Most people live as if they're immortal, wasting precious moments on meaningless activities, postponing important decisions, and treating time as an unlimited resource. But the Stoics practiced something that modern society desperately tries to avoid thinking about. They meditated on death. This is the law of mortality awareness, and it's forbidden because it forces you to confront the one truth that makes all other truths insignificant. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You could leave life right now. Let that determine what you do and say and think." This isn't morbid thinking, this is clarity thinking. When you truly understand that your time is limited and unpredictable, everything changes. You stop wasting energy on petty arguments. You stop postponing important conversations. You stop delaying meaningful actions. You stop tolerating situations and relationships that drain your life force. The awareness of mortality doesn't create anxiety. It creates urgency. It doesn't make you fearful. It makes you focused. It doesn't depress you. It awakens you. Because when you realize that every moment is precious and irreplaceable, you start living with an intensity and purpose that transforms everything you touch. This law is forbidden because it threatens the entire structure of mediocrity that keeps most people trapped in meaningless routines. When you truly embrace your mortality, you stop accepting less than you deserve. You stop settling for comfort over growth. You stop choosing security over significance. You become someone who lives fully because you understand that life is temporary. The seventh forbidden law will destroy your need for external circumstances to change before you can be happy. Most people live in a constant state of postponement, always waiting for better conditions, better opportunities, or better circumstances before they start living powerfully. But the Stoics discovered that this waiting is actually a form of self-imposed prison. This is the law of present moment mastery, and it's forbidden because it reveals that you already have everything you need to be extraordinary. Epictetus, despite being born into slavery and living with physical disabilities, understood something that free, healthy people often miss. External circumstances have very little power over your internal state unless you give them that power. He wrote, "It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters." This sounds simple, but it's actually the most difficult law to master because it requires you to take complete responsibility for your life experience. The present moment is the only moment where you have any real power. You cannot change the past and you cannot control the future, but you can master your response to what's happening right now. This moment, this breath, this choice, this is where transformation happens. Not tomorrow, not when conditions are perfect, not when you feel ready, but now. This law is forbidden because it removes every excuse you have for not living powerfully. You can't blame your parents, your circumstances, your genetics, your education, your resources, or your past. You can only choose how you respond to what's in front of you right now. And that choice, repeated moment by moment, day by day, creates the trajectory of your entire life. The eighth and final forbidden law will transform you into a person who operates from an entirely different level of consciousness. Most people live reactively, responding to whatever life presents without conscious intention or deeper purpose. But the Stoics discovered that true power comes from living according to principles that transcend circumstances. This is the law of virtue above all, and it's forbidden because it creates people who cannot be corrupted, manipulated, or broken by external pressures. Virtue, in the Stoic sense, isn't about following rules or being perfect. It's about having an internal compass that guides your actions regardless of what others are doing, what might be easier, or what might be more profitable. It's about choosing courage over comfort, truth over popularity, justice over advantage, and wisdom over ignorance, even when these choices cost you something in the short term. Marcus Aurelius, despite having absolute power as emperor, wrote, "Just that you do the right thing, the rest doesn't matter." This is revolutionary thinking in a world obsessed with results, recognition, and rewards. The Stoic finds fulfillment not in outcomes but in the integrity of their actions. They sleep peacefully not because everything went their way, but because they acted in alignment with their deepest values. This law is forbidden because it creates people who are truly free. They cannot be bought with money, threatened with consequences, or seduced with promises. They act from an internal authority that makes them immune to external manipulation. In a world that depends on people compromising their values for convenience, these individuals become dangerous examples of what's possible when someone refuses to sell their soul. If you've absorbed these 8 forbidden laws, you now possess knowledge that most people will never understand. You have the blueprint for mental invincibility, emotional mastery, and spiritual freedom. But knowledge without application is worthless. These laws only become powerful when you live them, breathe them, and embody them in every choice you make. The path ahead won't be easy. Living by these laws means standing apart from the crowd, choosing difficulty over ease, and taking responsibility when others blame circumstances. It means being misunderstood by people who still live as slaves to their emotions, their fears, and their need for approval. But it also means experiencing a level of freedom, power, and peace that most people can't even imagine. Marcus Aurelius, Seneca, and Epictetus didn't develop these laws in times of comfort and ease. They forged them in the fire of real difficulties, real challenges, and real suffering. They left us these teachings not as theoretical concepts, but as practical tools for surviving and thriving in a world that will test every aspect of your character. You now have a choice. You can continue living as you have, controlled by your emotions, seeking approval from others, fearing failure, avoiding discomfort, and postponing your real life until conditions are perfect. Or you can begin the journey of implementing these forbidden laws, transforming yourself into someone who is truly unbreakable, mentally invincible, and spiritually free. The choice is yours. But remember, once you begin this path, there's no going back. You cannot unknow what you now know. You cannot return to unconscious living once you've tasted conscious power. These 8 forbidden laws will permanently rewire your mind, but only if you have the courage to apply them. If this message has awakened something within you, if you feel the call to become more than you've ever been before, then like this video, share it with others who are ready for transformation, and commit to living by these ancient laws in your modern life. Your future self is waiting for you to begin.